Hi everyone, Ravi this side. Welcome to Engineering Adda. Today in this video, we are going to discuss about the HTTP headers of REST API. So first of all, what are we are going to do here is we are going to discuss about the HTTP headers, what it is, why we are using it, and how we can use it. We are also going to see what are the different type of HTTP headers we have, and what are its uses, its working. Everything we are going to see, and its like advantage, disadvantage, its real life applications, everything we are going to see here in this video. So first of all, we are going to briefly discuss about HTTP headers, its types, its uses, and then after that we are going to create a Spring Boot application, and then practically we'll try to see the HTTP headers in details and their implementation, their uses, everything, their working, everything we are going to discuss there with a practical implementation. So this is about the video's agenda. Now let me go to the next slide and discuss about HTTP headers. So HTTP headers are the core part of HTTP request and responses. Okay. So when you're, let's say you're developing a REST API. So you have some request and the response, right, of that API. HTTP headers are the core part of that request and response. So HTTP headers are the core part of HTTP request and response, used to pass additional information between the client and the server. So the main purpose of HTTP headers is to pass additional information between client and the server. They provide essential details about the request or responses, such as what its content type is, authorization tokens, caching policy, and many more. Okay. So the main purpose of HTTP headers is to pass the additional information between the client and the server. Let me try to give you one example. Let's say you have a front-end application, and front-end application is sending something in the request header. So at the backend, you can receive it out, and according to that request header, you are going to work. So this headers is trying to pass the information between the client and the server, between the front end and the back end, you can say. And if you want to send something in the response to the front end, then you can set those additional values, additional details in the response header of your API. So let me try to explain you the scenario. Let's say you have developed a backend API in Spring Boot, and those API is being supplied to the front end. Front end is going to use that API to integrate it out in the front end and try to work on it. So let's say that API is giving the list of posts, okay, and the front end is going to use that API to display the list of posts in the front end. Okay, now from the back end, in the API response header, what you can do is you can set the details that is needed by the front end, like its content type. If you are applying the let's say zipping mechanism, then you can also send that it is zipped or not. So those additional information you can send in the API response header, so that the front end can utilize it out. Similar way, the front end can send some information from the front end side to the back end API in the form of HTTP headers, so that according to the value set into the HTTP headers, the back end can work. So let's say a front end is setting one additional field in the HTTP headers, saying that like he is setting a field called flag, and if the flag is true, the backend should work in a way. If the flag is false, the backend should work in a different way. So that based on that additional information that is being sent from the front end in the HTTP headers, the backend is working differently. Okay, so this is what I just want to say, that the HTTP headers used to establish the connection between the client and the server and pass the additional information between the client and the server. Okay, so this is about the HTTP headers. Now let me try to go to the next slide and discuss about types of HTTP headers we have. So the first one is general header, apply to both request and response, but not body of the message. Example, cache control connection. Okay, so the first type of HTTP header is general headers. Coming to the second one is request header. This provides information about the request or the client. Example, accept, authorization, or user agent. So these things that are given in the example are the parameters that are being sent from either front end or the back end. So here when we are talking about the request headers, accept, authorization, and user agent are the parameter being sent by the front end to the back end in the API request header. Okay. Similarly, response headers. So when we are dealing with the response header, that means a backend or the server is sending this response header to the front end. Okay. So this response header provide information about the response, example, the location, server, or WWE authenticate. Okay. And the fourth one is entity headers. This contain information about the body of the resource, such as content length or the ME type. Example, content length, content type. So these are the different type of HTTP headers. Okay, now let me try to go to the next slide and discuss about the uses of HTTP headers in the REST API. In the REST APIs, the HTTP headers play a critical role, like it plays the critical role in authentication, passing authentication token or the API keys. So let's say you are going to access one API, okay, and to access that API, you need to pass the authentication token in that API. So how you will pass it out? You can use HTTP headers to pass that authentication token to access that API. Okay. Now the second uses is content negotiation, indicating the format, example, JSON or XML, the client can handle, or the format of the data being sent. So let's say UI or the client is trying to get the information in the form of JSON. So he can set this accept like content type. He can set this field, let's say content type, in the header as a JSON, so that when this request is going to the backend should send the data in the form of the JSON, reading that content type which is set to the JSON coming from the UI. Okay, so this indicates that content negotiation can also be done using the HTTP headers. Like the front end is asking for a certain type of content from the backend, and that information is being passed to the backend from the HTTP headers setting this content type field. Now the third one is caching, managing caching policy, like cache control headers we can send to manage the caching policy. Coming to the fourth one is custom information, sending additional, often application specific information. So let's say you want to, like I give you the example of passing a flag from the UI. So let's say you want to pass a flag from the front end or the client side in the request header, and that based on that flag, the backend is going to work. Okay, so this comes under the custom information being sent from the front end to the back end. So these are also the one of the uses of HTTP headers. Now we have discussed about the uses of HTTP headers like authentication, content negotiation, caching, and custom information being passed. Now coming to the next slide, HTTP headers in Spring Boot. Okay, Spring Boot provides several ways to work with the HTTP headers in the REST APIs. Below are the common scenario, like reading the HTTP headers, setting the HTTP headers in the response. So what we are going to do here is we are going to develop a Spring Boot application. We'll try to see the different type of HTTP headers in the Spring Boot, and then we'll try to see how they are working. So here I have listed down the common scenarios like reading the HTTP headers and setting up the HTTP headers in the response. So everything we are going to discuss. Okay. Now, when we are telling about the reading HTTP headers, to read HTTP headers in the Spring Boot controller, you can use @ request header annotation. how we use @request body or request body annotation in the controller, the same way we can use @request header annotation in the controller or in API to read the headers coming from the front end and according to that work. Now the second thing is setting HTTP headers in the response. So let's say you want to send one response, or you want to send a response of a API to the UI, and in that case you want to set some additional field in your response header. Then you can use this HTTP servlet response or response entity to set those additional field in the response headers, and so that UI can use it out. Coming to the third one is custom interceptor for HTTP headers. So how we can use custom interceptor for HTTP headers, we are also going to see that things. Okay, so these are the things, and now coming to the conclusion, HTTP headers are an essential part of the REST APIs, providing necessary information about the request and the responses. In a Spring Boot application, you can easily read, set, and manipulate these headers using various approaches like request headers to read out the HTTP request, HTTP servlet response to set the response of the HTTP header, and response entity is also used to set the response of the HTTP headers. And custom interceptor, we are going to also see how we can use the custom interceptor to play with the HTTP headers. They are especially useful in scenarios like content negotiation, authentication, and caching, making your API more robust and flexible. So these are the conclusion, and this is about the theoretical part of HTTP headers. Now what we are going to do is we are going to create a Spring Boot application. There we'll try to see how the HTTP headers are working, and we are also going to see the different type of HTTP headers by creating the APIs. So let me try to come out of it and go to the IntelliJ, create one Spring Boot application here. So I'm using the IntelliJ Ultimate version. So what I can do is directly from IntelliJ itself, I can create a Spring Boot application here. If you're not using it out, what you can do is you can go to the Spring IO, or you can say that start.spring.io. There itself, it will open up the same pop-up, and you can create your application how I'm going to create here. So let's say we are going to create the application. Let's say we have to provide the application name. Let's say it is HTTP headers in HTTP headers of REST API. Okay. Now select the Maven here. Go next, and just going to select the Spring Web here. Create and open it in a new tab. Just wait for a few seconds. It will try to download the dependency that you have added, and it will do the necessary configuration of your application so that you can start your development after that. So just wait for a few seconds, and then we can start the development. Now coming to this slide, let me try to. So first of all, what we see here is HTTP headers is used to pass the additional information between the client and the server, right? So here we are going to use the Postman as a client, and the Spring Boot application that we have developed will be working as a server. Okay, and in that Spring Boot application, we'll try to design couple of APIs. Okay, and then we'll discuss this HTTP headers one by one through the practical implementation. Okay, now let me go to the IntelliJ again. Close this out. Go to the application and go to the source main, Java, and here you can write your codes. Okay, so let me try to create one class called let's say HTTP headers sample controller. Okay, and before going to write the codes, let me try to open the Postman here. So just this is a controller, so we need to annotate this class with @REST controller annotation. So just annotate it out, and let's say I'm going to develop a API of GET. Okay, or you can say GET API. So let's say it's a GET mapping, and let's say it is get HTTP headers, something like that, or let's say it is read HTTP headers. Okay, now let's say public string read HTTP headers, and here we are just going to use the annotation called HTTP request header. Okay, so just use this request header, and let's say your header is type of string object, and let's say headers. Just import the map and we are good. Now you can see in this example what we are going to do is let me try to put this / here. In this example what we are going to do is we are going to read the headers that is coming from the client, and how we can read it out we are going to see that. So what we are going to do is when we are going to hit this API from the client side, from the postman, we'll try to have couple of additional fields set up in the client, and those in the headers, and those fields we are going to read here. Or first of all what we are going to do is we are going to just simply try to print out the header here. Okay, so just let me try to print it out. So just let's say it is headers. One by one we'll see how this is working. Okay, and let me try to return something here. Let's say it is reading HTTP headers. Okay, so it's this is what we are returning from this API, and we are just logging out the headers that we are going to read. Okay, now just try to run your application, and what you can do is you can open up the Postman here, and let me try to copy this API, and this API what you can do is you can go to the Postman, try to hit it out. So first of all let me try to show you that our application is up on the port number 8080. So locally our application is up on the port number 8080, and this is the API that we are going to hit. So the URL would be something like http ://localhost :8080, and then the API that you are going to hit. And if you'll come here, you can see that this is the get API, and now in the headers, this headers is the request header. Okay, and this is the header that we are going to print out. And here you can see these are the fields that are already set in the headers, like host, postman token, user agent, accept encoding, connection, and this is the additional field that I have put as a username, which I have provided the value as ABC or XYZ. Okay, so our application is up, and what we are doing is when we'll try to hit this API, the header will come up here, and then we are just printing out that header and returning this response. Just hit this application, and here you can see that we are getting 200 okay response, and we are seeing this statement or the string that we are passing out, which is reading HTTP headers. You can see that the same thing we are passing out, and the header that we are printing out you can see in the logs. So you can see that we have the username that we have set, which is this. Coming to the another thing is we have the user agent, and the user agent is postman runtime. You can see that the same thing you can find out here as well. User agent is postman runtime /7.39.0. Accept is asterisk /*. So all those headers are coming up here, and we can read it out. So let's say what I'm saying is, let's say client is going to send a flag. Okay, so let's say it is flag, and its value is true. Okay, it should be let's say it will come as a string, so don't worry on that. So either we can use a string here. Let's say it is some value. Okay, so let's say it is name, and let's say if the name is Amit, we should do something. Okay, so according to this flag, the backend can write down its logic. Okay, so let me try to write down one logic here. If headers dot get, you have to provide the key. Let's say it is name, right? This is what we set. If name dot equals is Amit, which we are sending here, then try to do something else. Let's say just printing out something. Let's say if the name is Amit, try to print out that headers are being read correctly. Okay, else not able to read headers. Okay, now let me try to run this application again and try to hit the API. Okay, so just wait for a few seconds and open up the Postman, try to hit it out and go there. So you can see that it is coming, headers are being read correctly. That means if you are setting out name as Amit, it is going inside this block. And let me try to change the name to, let's say, ABC, something like that, and then send it out. Now you can see that not able to read the headers. So based upon the information that being passed from the UI side or from the client, the backend can work. Okay. Now how we can read out those flags or those criteria that are being sent from the headers, from the UI? How we can read out those things? So using this request headers, we can do that, right? And this is how you can see that the HTTP request header or HTTP headers are playing a crucial role between the communication between this UI, or you can say front end or client, and the back end or the server. So this is the role of HTTP headers. It will try to do a communication between client and the server, and this is how these are being done. Now here we have seen the example of reading the HTTP headers. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another example where we can set the response header that we are sending to the client. Okay, so here you can see when we are hitting this API, these are the request headers, and when we are receiving the response, you can see this is the response reading HTTP headers. In the response also we have one headers. If you'll open up, you can see that we have content type, we have content length, we have date, and keep alive and connection. Okay, so these are the fields that are being sent in the response header. Now if you want to set something inside this response header, how you can do that, how you can set those details, so that we are going to cover here. So just copy this piece of code and paste it out, and let's say it is something like set HTTP header, and let's say in that case what you can do is you can use the HTTP servlet headers. So here you can use HTTP servlet response, sorry, not request, and just pass this as a header, print it out, and let's say we want to set something here. So just let me try to remove this piece of code and then try to do that. So let's say we are passing this HTTP headers response, copy this, we are just printing out this header response, and then after that let me try to return something, setting HTTP headers response. Okay, and we are good. Now let me try to run this and then try to hit the API first and then show what we are getting. So just try to go there and paste it out, hit this, and come here. You can see that in the response, okay, in the response we are getting only the object here, right? We are not getting the details. Okay, so don't worry on that. Now here you can see that in the response we have this 5 field, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set one field here. So let's say how we can set it out. So just try to call this HTTP response and then try to set headers, and in the set headers you can provide the key and value pairs that you want to set. So let's say I just want to set a name here, and let's say the name is Amir, okay, something like that, and we are good. Now just run this application again and try to hit this API again, and then see in the response of that particular API what you are getting here. So we are good. Now just hit it out, and here you can see that in the response header we are having the key value pairs which is name Amir, right? So that means we are able to read and set the HTTP headers. Now let me try to tell you the another way how you can set the HTTP response header. Okay, so just let me try to copy this piece of code, and here we have seen about how we can use the HTTP servlet response to set the HTTP response header. The another way of setting the HTTP response header is using the response entity. So I'm going to create API here. Let's say it is response entity. Okay, and then what we are going to do is just remove this piece of code. Let's say setting HTTP response header, and here the return type would be response entity of, let's say, string type. You can put either question or anything, like whatever thing you are returning. The return type of this method is the same thing you have to put in the response entity in the bracket. Okay, now let me try to remove this piece of code, and here what you need to do is you need to create a HTTP headers here. So just create an object of HTTP header, and good. Now just I'm going to set something here in the HTTP header. So just call the headers.set. Let's say I'm going to set the name here, and in the name let's say I'm going to provide the Ravi. Okay, now just okay, this would be comma. Now we have the headers, and we have one fields setted in the headers with the key and value. Okay, now what I'm going to do is just simply return this out. Let's say it is response entity, and okay, and then just call the headers here, and in the headers you can pass the header that you have created, and then just in the body I'm just going to return something. Let's say setting up something like setting up the HTTP response header. Okay, HTTP response header. Okay, and then we are good. Now just run this application and then try to hit the API. Copy this API and go to the Postman, paste it there, and then once it is up, it is up, just try to hit it out. Okay, you can see that in the response header we are getting the name as Ravi, and this is the field that we are setting in the response header of this API. So this is another way how you can set out the response header. So what we've seen as of now is how we can read the request header, how we can set the response header using two methods. One is the HTTP servlet response and another is the response entity. Now what I'm going to show you is how you can play with how you can create your custom interceptor for HTTP headers. So those things also we are going to see here. So just try to create the classes. Let's say custom interceptor. let me try to create the class here, and just let me try to copy this piece of code. I will explain you everything one by one. So as of now, I'm just trying to put it here. So we are creating one class custom interceptor, and it implements the handler interceptor interface. Now we have this method to override, which is pre-handle. Inside that we are passing the HTTP servlet request, response, and then object handler. And inside that we are just trying to set one request header. So in the request header we are setting out something here. Okay. Sorry, in the request header we are trying to read out something from the request header, and then just try to return something. Okay, so let me try to print out the thing that we are reading out. So just let's say we are going to read out some different thing. How we can, if we can go to the postman and go to the header. Let's say we want to read this. Okay, let me try to pass something. Let's say we are passing key 1. Okay, and we want to read that key 1. Let's say its value is ABC. Okay, we want to read that key 1 from the request. So just put it here. So from the headers, it will request header. It will try to get this field, and then we have the value. We're just trying to print out that value here. Okay. And before going to use this custom interceptor, what we need to do is we need to register this custom interceptor. So for that we have the code here. So just come down. You have to create a web config which would be implementing the web MVC configurer. Okay, so just let me try to create this class, and let me again copy this piece of code. And this is a configuration class. It is implementing the web MVC configurer, and we are auto wiring the custom interceptor that we have created inside this class, and then trying to register it out. Okay, so inside this add interceptor method, what we are passing is we are passing the interceptor registry, and then inside that, with the help of that registry, we are calling the add interceptor. Inside that add interceptor, we are adding our interceptor that we have created here, which is a custom interceptor. And inside the custom interceptor, we have this pre-handle method where we are passing the request, response, and handler. Okay, and with the help of this request and response, we can do the things that we are doing already in our this controller. So in the controller, you can see that we are reading out the HTTP request. We are setting the HTTP response header. So those things also we can do here in the custom interceptor. As of now, what we are doing is we are trying to read out something from the custom interceptor. Okay, from the HTTP request. So let me try to show you something. Okay, so when we are let's say we are going to hit one API, which is this, what we have, which is response entity, and inside that, inside the HTTP request header, we are setting one key, which is key 1, and the same value we are trying to read out through the custom interceptor that we have created. So you can see that this thing, right? So let me try to run this application again and try to hit our API, which is this response entity. So in the response entity, what we are doing here is in this API, we are trying to add one key value pairs in the HTTP response header, which is name, and the value is Ravi. So in the response header, it will be adding this key value pairs. But again, when we are going back to the custom interceptor, what it will do, it will try to read out the value of the key 1, which we are setting as a HTTP request header in our API. So when we are trying to call it from the postman, right? So this value will be logged in the like in our console, and the same thing will be happening. How this API is performing the same way it will perform, but again the one extra thing that it will do is it will try to log out this key one value. Okay, so this is what we are going to do. Now let me try. Okay, we already run this application. Again, go to the postman and try to hit this API. So the same result we are getting. If you go to the body, you will find that we are getting this response, and in the response header we are having this name as Ravi, and everything look good. Now in the request HTTP header, we are adding this key1 field, and its value is ABC, and that is what we are logging here in the custom interceptor that we have created, and the same thing you can see in the console we are getting. So this is how you can use the custom interceptor, where we pass the HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response, and object handler, and with the help of this request and response, whatever thing you want to do with the API at the general level, you can do that. Like for whole application, you can set out the response for the APIs inside this application, and if you want to read the request from any of the APIs under this application, you can do it here at the custom interceptor level. Make sure that when you are creating the interceptor, you have to register the interceptor. So for that, we are creating this configuration, which is web config, which is implementing the web MVC configurer, and then after that we are with the help of this add interceptor method, we are trying to add the interceptor or the custom interceptor that we have created. So this is about HTTP headers of REST API. So let me try to remind you what we have discussed here is. So first thing that we have discussed here is what it is, its overview, and then types of HTTP headers like request headers, response headers, entity headers, and general headers, and then its uses. So in the uses, I only show you how you can either set key value pairs in the response, or in the response or request headers, how you can read out the key value pairs from the request headers, how you can set the key value pair in the response header. I showed you those things, but at the place of setting out the response header with the key value pairs, you can either pass the authentication key or content negotiation the same way how we were doing the custom, how we are using the custom information. You can pass the authentication, content negotiation, or caching, everything you can do the same way how we did. If you want to read it out from the request header, you can do the same way. If you want to set it out in the response header, you can do the same way. We were showing the general approach. Yeah, again, we were showing the general approach. Now you can do whatever thing you want to do. You can play around it. Okay. Now coming to the other things, we see how we can read out the HTTP request header and how we can set the HTTP response header. And then we created the custom interceptor for HTTP headers, and then there we saw how we can use the custom interceptor, how we can register it out, and how we can, if you want to read the HTTP request headers, how we can do it in the custom interceptor. So everything we have discussed here, and this piece of code I will try to put on the GitHub, and I will provide the link of this repository on the GitHub, so that directly you can come up here and then try to have a look on this. So this is about the video, guys. If you like the video, please hit the like button and please subscribe this channel for more such content. Thanks.